thank you very much, Meg, for that kind introduction, and thank you very much, Wes, for inviting me along today. It's a great privilege and a delight to be speaking at this conference on this National Women in Engineering Day. Really quite an impressive movement that's been created, particularly given that it only started in terms of National Women in Engineering Day last year. We are here in Birdcage Walk, but there is a network of events that is spanning the length and breadth of the country, from Aberdeen to Cardiff to Somerset to Norfolk, Belfast to Portsmouth, many, many locations in between, and far beyond. There is even an event taking place in Kuwait, I noticed from the website. There's a wide range of things going on, from speaker events, panel Q&As, technical presentations on topics from Crossrail to low-carbon economy to motorsports to radiation, Guinness World Record attempts, and a wide range of ways in which people are being engaged from all ages as well. So there's Lego challenges and tasks to try and build a crane with some sweets and cocktail sticks. Lots of the events have particular themes, such as responding to natural disasters is one, or how to help tomato farmers in Nepal, or my personal favourite one, which is themed of a zombie apocalypse. So there is a wide range of activity going on, and I think what that really shows is the breadth and variety of careers in engineering, which everyone in this room will be well aware of. But as we know, sadly, far too few young people are aware of, particularly girls and young women. And it's about young people, but it's also about those who are advising them. So whether or not their parents or their careers teachers are likely to recommend a career in engineering. Now, it's only the second Women in Engineering Day, but it is the 96th year of WES, and I think looking back at that history is really interesting to see the context. We have had women really fighting and innovating in engineering for more than 96 years, but that was when there was a real impetus following the end of the First World War, when so many women had to, through necessity, get involved because the men had not been there, and really pioneered and showed that they could do it just as well as the men. And when that war ended, great though it was to have the end of the war, those women understandably were not happy to just go back to doing what they had done before, because they had found these new outlets for their skills and creativity. And so WES was born. 96 years on, it is worth thinking about the pace of progress. And unfortunately, it is not good enough. Meg talked about the situation 10 years ago, and it hasn't been changing anything like as rapidly as it needs to. Women still make up about 6% of the engineering profession, and that has been pretty much static since 2002. Even if you look at the inputs into the profession, who's starting out in engineering, because obviously changing the makeup of the entire workforce will take longer, but we're looking at 14% of students on university courses on engineering being girls, and that's actually down from a couple of years ago. 2012, it was 16%. Only half of the women who graduate in STEM end up going to work in STEM, and the equivalent figure for boys is 2/3. So there is something that's happening. There is an issue about getting more girls into studying these subjects and what we can do to make them more attractive or to encourage girls to follow the things they're interested in. But even when they do that, they are less likely to pursue careers in those areas than the boys that have been studying alongside them. And the bottom line is that this is a shocking waste of talent that the UK just cannot afford. We had the Perkins review into engineering. We know that businesses decry the lack of enough people with the skills that they need to bring their businesses forward. And we know that we need to be doubling the number of recruits into engineering. And that can't just be done with the guys that are available. So we do need to be starting at the earliest age and encouraging more girls to take science subjects at school and encouraging young women to pursue those through their further studies. And that means a lot of challenge to the world around us and the things that often are taken for granted. When you look at toys and the way that they are marketed, are science sets for boys, or surely science can be for everyone? When you look at recent campaigns such as Let Clothes Be Clothes, where a group of concerned parents took Marks and Spencer's to task for launching a range of pyjamas in conjunction with the Natural History Museum, with wonderful dinosaurs all over them, but only for boys. And why can't little girls have dinosaur pyjamas too? And I think quite right, fair enough. And they did ultimately get change. So whether it's in the television programs that young people are consuming, whether it's in the toys and the things that are surrounding them, or indeed the role models on the television. If you think about popular science programs, you know, how many can you think of which are fronted by women? In all of these areas, we need to be making sure that we increase that diversity so that we have those role models that young girls can aspire to. But we need to do more than just that, because the actual experience is important. I obviously have had a career in politics where it is not unusual to be the only woman in the room. And I'm sure that for many involved in engineering and in science, that will be a familiar feeling as well. And that can be fine, but it can also feel a bit strange. And it can feel sometimes like you are other. And that uncomfortable feeling can be something which is enough to drive some people away and say, well, actually, I'd rather use my talents elsewhere, where I'm not continually reminded of my difference, and I am embraced for what I offer, and in fact, that I bring a different perspective is something which is seen as being particularly valuable and useful. So we need to make sure, whether that's in the laboratory, in the university, or once somebody's actually working in the world of work in an engineering job, that they feel comfortable, they feel valued, and they feel that they can get on and be successful. I heard about a young engineering graduate, and she had said that when she was studying, the lecturer had always made a point of making sure the girls didn't get their hands dirty, or that they didn't lift any of the heavy containers, even though the girls who were studying had made absolutely clear that they had no problem getting their hands dirty and lifting the containers. And so those kind of small, low-level messages that get sent out just send out a suggestion that this isn't really something for girls, and therefore that can be very unwelcoming to those girls and young women. And we need to recognise how serious this challenge actually is. I think what was interesting and perhaps rather depressing about the understandable controversy over Tim Hunt's comments was actually that he wasn't aware, as somebody senior within the scientific community, of just how damaging those kind of comments could be to the next generation of potential women scientists. That it, regardless of whether or not they ended up being brought to a global audience's attention, that for the girls and the women in the room to whom he was speaking, that could have a really negative impact, and that this isn't something which is all solved and which is fine, and so we can have a joke about it. This is something which is deadly serious. This is a major problem that science and engineering has. And I think that lack of recognition, and by no means is that the only place where that attitude is there. I think that lack of recognition is one of the biggest barriers that we face. And that same attitude will stop companies from making sure that they offer the kind of workplaces that are enjoyable places to be for women. So, yes, we need to get more women into engineering in the first place. But we also need to address this brain drain. How do we keep women in engineering? And if you feel that you won't get promoted and that you will not be able to be as successful as the blokes, then that can be a reason why many women would just drop out and say, actually, do you know what? I've got very marketable skills, an engineering degree is something which is well recognised across a range of different businesses and workplaces, and I can get something which is more enjoyable as a place to work elsewhere with these skills. And I think that is something which the companies that are working in engineering absolutely need to recognise is a huge risk, because if other businesses and organisations are waking up to the fact that they need to respond to the type of workplace that women want to be in, if they don't keep pace, then they will continue to lose that talent. And there is a big issue about children and the role that women can play in the workplace after having had children. A good friend of mine who is really involved in WES Scotland is Anne Madsen. And she is an engineer at BAE. And last year she did a fascinating survey of the women she knows in engineering who had had children, and asked them what their experiences had been. And I have to say it was pretty bleak to look at the results. So she said, first of all, there were some people who had just made the decision that they would just work through. They would take maybe their 6 weeks of maternity leave, or in some cases, if the employer enhanced it for 3 or 4 months, they would take 3 or 4 months off. But that was it. They wouldn't be taking even 6 months. They would just come straight back to work and doing the same hours as they were before, and just trying to juggle it all until they got to a position where they may be able to make the case for more flexibility. And that was one way to do it. She said the others who had taken more time out, maybe they'd taken a year or two out, maybe they'd had a more than one child, and they'd taken a few years out. And she said there seemed to be two main categories. First of all, there were people who had tried to get back at the same level they had been before they left. And she said they didn't manage it. They ended up leaving engineering entirely and going working elsewhere, because they could not get the same level job that they had had before they left. And the others who did manage to get back in said they had to start right at the bottom again, at graduate level jobs. And then she said they did progress more quickly, and so after 5 years or so, they could be pretty much back up where they would have been, but they would never get back the lost time. And that's a pretty sad state of affairs, when although not every woman is going to want to have children, a significant proportion of the workforce will. We need to have a better way of dealing with that. The buy-in to flexible working is far too patchy. It's a working culture that's designed by men and for men. And frankly, that's pretty stupid, because there aren't enough men to fill the skills gaps that we have in engineering. So we need to be designing a much more inclusive workplace culture. I think there's 3 things in particular that need to happen. The first is to embrace flexibility. The second is that companies need to support women through a period of maternity. And the third thing is that we need men to be pioneers. Now, embracing flexibility and flexible working is sensible on so many fronts. First of all, it's the law. As of last year, every employee has got the right to request flexible working, and your employer can only say no if there's a sound business reason for turning it down. But it's not just because it's the law. It also makes good business sense. If you have the ability to have flexible working, you can access a much wider talent pool. And that's not just about women. It's about all sorts of people who want to work in a different way, who have other responsibilities outside of work, whether it's volunteering, whether it's a commitment to sport, whether it's people who you would want to keep in the workforce as they get older, but they no longer want to work full time. It also leads to more productive, motivated and efficient workers. There is a huge problem in British workplaces with presenteeism, people feeling that being there and being seen to be there for every hour of the day is what is expected, and that does not lead to productive working. So organisations need to get serious about embracing flexibility. And they also need to recognise how important it is to support women through maternity and to return to the workplace. Think about the cost of training somebody new. It really is a no-brainer. But it can be very hard for people to return. I have to say, my experience, I had my son 18 months ago, and I went back to my ministerial job 6 months after he was born. And I vividly remember my terror at the first speech that I gave when I came back. It had only been 6 months, but I was really worried that I would have forgotten how to make a speech. You know, if you'd asked me to, off the top of my head, make up a new verse to The Wheels on the Bus, not a problem at all. To juggle clearing sick up while being on the phone to somebody else and simultaneously stopping a small child going into a dangerous situation, yep, I could do that. But I really had worried that I would have forgotten the knowledge and the skills to do my professional job. And I hadn't, and it came back, and the first couple of weeks were a bit tricky as I needed to get back up to speed with things, but it did come back. But that, even after a small period of time away, is a big confidence challenge. And my sister, who is a doctor, she found exactly the same thing. It's the experience when I speak to women in all sorts of jobs. It's entirely natural. And you can help women through that. ASDA, actually, have a fantastic system in their HQ. They have people who are going on mat leave get buddied up with somebody else who has been on mat leave perhaps in the last few years. They stay in touch during the period of maternity leave, probably for a cup of tea and cake in a rather civilised way. And then when the woman is returning to work, she's got somebody, she's kept in touch with the organisation. She understands what's moved on in the business, and she's got somebody who's a supportive person to talk to about any issues. Little things can make a big difference. And if somebody has been out of the workplace for a number of years, then I think the returnships idea is a wonderful one. To have something a bit more structured over a period of time to make sure that somebody can fill in what gaps have emerged in staying up to date with the latest knowledge or technology, and also to make sure that they have that confidence in coming back. And the other thing is, of course, that de-risks it for a new employer. So I think they can really work well for both sides, and I know there's a session coming up later on that. And then the third thing is that we need men to be pioneers. Engineering history is full of women pioneers, from Ada Lovelace to Amy Johnson to Daphne Jackson. The list goes on. And now it is men's turn. We will not achieve equality at work until we have more equality at home. And men's role as dads is just as important as women's role as mums. Yet the way our society has been structured seems to place the vast majority of the responsibility for parenting on women, and for men, they almost get written out of the script. And this doesn't work for men, or for women, or for children, actually. And that's why it needs to change. The government, I was delighted when I was a minister to introduce shared parental leave, which came into force this April, which tries to make the real point that families should have choice about how they split their caring responsibilities, that the leave that is available should be able to be transferable between both parents. Because actually, part of this is not just going to be about dealing with the women issue, getting more women in and helping women. It's also about what happens on the other side. What about the men in the workplace? We actually need that men who are dads admit to that in the workplace, that sometimes if they need to go and do the nursery pickup, they say, I need to leave at 5:30 on the dot because I need to do the nursery pickup tonight, and that is seen as acceptable for them to do so. And there is actually a bit of reverse sexism going on here, because in my experience, it is actually easier for women to admit their family responsibilities because there is more accommodation, if you like, made. Whereas if a man does it, then there's an attitude amongst some people where this isn't quite right, this isn't quite the norm. And so it can be more difficult for men to ask for flexible working or different arrangements to be made. So it is pioneering for men to do this. It's just a different kind of pioneering to what women had to do. The barriers are different, but they're still there. And so we need men to do that, and we need women to embrace that and encourage that too. This is a critical business issue, and it's an issue for the whole profession of engineering. I think it's great the strides that the institutes, the Royal Academy, Royal Society have been making in trying to address this with government funds to support initiatives, but it needs to be recognised as the strategic challenge that it is. And while we get those organisations to embrace support for women returners and flexible workplaces, and while we get men to be those pioneers so that we can create the change we want, organisations like WES are so important to create that supportive network, to share your experiences, to break through feelings of isolation, to celebrate inspiring women across the profession and help each other to thrive. So a very happy National Women in Engineering Day. I hope there will be many more successful ones to come. Thank you very much.